WNBA All-Star voting returns. Round one are in. Tyrese Haliburton not looking like he's going to be an All-Star starter, but still getting some praise in the votes. We'll talk about that. And the last 2 minutes report from Sixers-Pacers is out. And yikes is all I can say about that. We'll talk about those two things before Danny Marang joins us to talk Pacers-Blazers ahead of the battle tonight in Indianapolis. All coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, holy moly, a lot of news to get to from the NBA side. All-Star voting returns. Round one are out. Tyrese Haliburton on the list for guard votes in the Eastern Conference. We'll break down that, what it means, all that sort of stuff. Then, last 2 minutes report from Pacers-Sixers is out. Yikes. A lot of incorrect calls there. Fans were asking a lot about the refs after that game. I got definitely the most tweets about the refs I've gotten after that game, and for good reason, it turns out. And then Danny Marang is going to join us from Jack Ramsey's and 1080 The Fan in Portland to talk Pacers-Blazers ahead of the two teams battling tonight. We talk a little team building as well. We'll start with the fun stuff, the All-Star voting stuff. First round came out today. The second round of fan voting comes out next Thursday. Third round next Thursday after that. You get the idea. And what this is the fan voting for starters in the NBA All-Star game. How this works, if you'll recall, is it's kind of ranked, right? So 50% of a player's ballot, if you will, their ranking for being an all-star starter in either conference is fan vote. The other 25%, there's two groups that it's broken into, 25% from current player voting and 25% from a media panel, right? So if you finish 8th in fan voting and then first in player voting and first in media voting, your score is 10, but you have a weighted score of 50% for your fan voting. Now that's how it's decided. The lowest score, the lowest two scores for guards and lowest three front court guys make the all-star team as starters. So you got to be really high up on this list to realistically have a chance to be a starter. First round of voting in the East and West is out. The only Pacer on there, Tyrese Haliburton, 281,691 votes. He is the 8th highest ranked guard in the Eastern Conference on the votes. Look, there's a chance he could start in this game. I think he's been one of the best 3, 4, 5 guards in the East, whatever cutoff you want to have. The voting from fans is who they want to see play in the game. And there just so happens to be a lot of people who live in San Francisco and LA and New York and Brooklyn. And so even in years where the best players are on the Pacers, it's really hard for the fan voting to go their way. And I think Tyrese Haliburton's been better than DeRozan and LaMelo Ball, the two guys immediately in front of him. Trae Young is 5th, Jaylen Brown's 4th, James Harden's 3rd, Donovan Mitchell 2nd, Kyrie's 1st. You get the picture. 8th is fine in a half popularity, half talent contest. Obviously, Haliburton's been better than the 8th best guard in the East, but that's just how this voting process is going to go. I think he can vault higher. He's definitely played better than a lot of the guys immediately in front of him, but looking pretty likely the starting backcourt in the East will be, two of Irving, Mitchell, Harden, Brown, and Trae Young, given their popularity and skill level this season. But 8th I actually thought there was a chance that Haliburton would not be on this at all, just from a popularity perspective. Like Domantas Sabonis, for example, not on this. He's not in the top 10 in Western Conference front corner voting. He's been awesome this year. Like Kevon Looney's on there. Larry Markkanen's on there. Larry Markkinen has been an all-star level player, but same kind of thing where I thought popularity might keep him off. Sabonis not on there. Crazy. De'Aaron Fox not on there. Also crazy. But it's not that. It's not crazy because of the structure. It's crazy because they have been one of the best 10 players in those groups, but fans want to see their guys. That's why Austin Reeves is on there, because there's a lot of Lakers fans. That's why Looney's on there. There's a lot of Warriors fans. That's just how it is. Either way, I think because of all the factors at play, Haliburton being 8th is actually kind of impressive. And I don't think he'll be a starter. I think he'll have to rely on being a reserve, which is chosen by the coaches, which is much more likely chance for him anyway. But that is where things stand as of the first round of voting. We'll get the next updates next Thursday. Let's dive into the other thing the NBA announced on Thursday. The last 2 minutes report from Sixers, Pacers, and Pacers fans, at least the ones I saw on Twitter, were not happy after Pacers Sixers. A lot of calls that were uncalls in their eyes late in that game, in regulation, in overtime. And the NBA releases the last 2 minutes report of games that feature, I forget what the exact criteria is, but it's the last 2 minutes of close games and games that go to overtime, things like that. And so one was released for Pacers Sixers. It included the last 2 minutes of regulation as well as the overtime period. And the NBA has 7 incorrect calls listed in that span, which is a lot of incorrect calls. Right at the start, Mathurin's first drive with under 2 minutes to go, he was fouled by D'Anthony Melton, according to the league. That did not get called. Tyrese Haliburton on his drive into the lane with about 20 seconds to go, 15 seconds to go to be exact. He was fouled when he turned the ball over. That one went uncalled. Both of those would have led to free throws, which the Pacers could desperately have used those points in that moment. With 10 seconds left, this is the only foul incorrectly that would have helped the Sixers. The first Tyrese Maxey layup that would have tied the game that Turner kind of affected and blocked. Should have been a foul on Miles Turner, not called. Tobias Harris comes up the floor and pushes Buddy Hield to get the rebound and ultimately tie the game. That should have been a foul, according to the NBA, on Tobias Harris for shoving Buddy Hield. So that was the 4 calls in the fourth quarter that were incorrect. 3 harm to the Pacers, 1 harm to the Sixers. Yeah, look, I'm receptive to this being a problem and a part of why the Pacers lost. I'm also receptive to the Pacers being down 13 early in the fourth quarter and having another boneheaded turnover in the final minute. Like, there are a lot of factors. This is not the reason the Pacers lost. It is part of the game that did not help them win. I think it's very important that everybody differentiates those things. That said, it definitely worked against them. I am not saying that this is not something that matters or anything like that. That's a lot of missed calls. Then in overtime, there was a foul. Turner fouls Tyrese Maxey with about a minute to go on a layup that did not go in, and that layup sitting above the rim, Montrezl Harrell actually touched it before he should have. That should have been offensive goaltending, but Harrell actually missed that layup anyway. So in the end, that should have just been Maxey free throws. And then the one that everybody was talking about, ironically, in this game was Mathurin with about 30 seconds to go, trying to shoot under the basket. And that was called a legal contact moment from James Harden. On that one, it says, Harden jumps alongside Mathurin while resting a hand on his body and does not apply force as he makes clean ball contact to block the shot at the basket. They called that a correct no call. So clean block for James Harden there. And then the last incorrect call, this one I didn't even think was a foul. Buddy Hield's prayer 3-point attempt at the end. James Harden actually trips him up. They should have called a foul. Buddy Hield shot it early to not get intentionally fouled so that they would get a 3 up instead of 2 free throws. He didn't make it. They lost. Apparently that should have been a foul call. So lots of stuff in that last 2 minutes report. I really hate talking about officiating. I think that NBA officials are really good. It's a very hard job. And I know that will get dunked on by a lot of people, but that's what I usually think in this game. Definitely some ones that, like, I even brought it up on the post-game show, which I very rarely do. And clearly, I think 7's the most I've ever seen in incorrect calls on a last 2 minutes report. I think the last 2 minutes reports are stupid. Like, nothing happens. Nothing's changed. Refs are evaluated based on their performance. I can send people the article if they want to read about that. Ben Dowsett did a great job reporting on that. But that's just the facts of that game. It was not kind to the Pacers at the end, to the point that Tyrese Haliburton, who we talked about at the beginning of the show, tweeted later in the day. He said, 2 minutes report, SMH. So not great. The Pacers lose, though. Nothing can be done. Moving on, I just wanted to share that information as it came out from the league. Let's talk some Portland Trailblazers. Danny Marang from Jacked Ramses and 1080 The Fan in Portland is going to join us to talk about the spunky Blazers in Indy tonight to face off with the Indiana Pacers. Before he comes in, though, I need to talk to you guys about LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools that go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post company and their 875 million member profiles to put your posts in front of the right people. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. It's super easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications all on one platform. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1. in delivering high-quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Now, let's bring in Danny Marang to talk Pacers Blazers. We are now joined by Danny Marang covering the Portland Trailblazers over at Jack Ramsey's, and for 1080 The Fan in Portland, the Blazers. Very fun basketball team, because on any given night, Damian Lillard can be the best player in the NBA. Anthony Simons has taken a big step forward. Their ancillary pieces make way more sense than they have any time in the last long time. The Blazers are fun. They're
7 years.
Go ahead. What you got for me, Danny? Tell me about the Blazers right now at the Vibes.
It makes the most sense in 7 years. That's what we'll go with.
Is that what was 7 years ago that was better?
Damon LaMarcus.
Oh, of course. The other superstar that they had in the last 7 years. Yeah, look, if the Blazers are a fun watch. They smoked the Pacers already this season. Haliburton did not play, so I'm kind of throwing that game out the window, although the Pacers did win the literal night before, the night after, without Haliburton. Either way, Blazers, on one hand, top 10 offense, above 500 record in the West, have one of the best players in the league. On the other hand, have lost 5 of 7, are getting inconsistent play from some of their young guys, injuries everywhere. Gary Payton Jr. missed so much time that made no sense to me, but that's not what we're here to talk about. What's going on with the Blazers, Danny? Are they more like the recent version we're seeing? Are they more like the total package? Where do you feel like this team is right now?
They're in between. I talked to Josh Hart at practice last week, and he mentioned that there was 4 games that they had dropped that unequivocally that they should have won. And you can say could have, would have, should have. They lost a heartbreaker to Denver on a last-second shot from Jamal Murray, where they kind of jacked up the coverage. They lost a game to the Clippers where they were up like 14, I want to say, in the fourth quarter. They just fell apart. Norman Powell had his little revenge game. And they lost back-to-back games in OKC when Damian Lillard became the all-time leading scorer in franchise history, where the first game when they were trying to get him the record, like everybody was just kind of stunted and broken and forcing it because it's such a big night. Next game, they just lulled their way through it. It was just an ugly, choppy game. It was a 6-game road trip. It was game 5. And now they've dropped 2 more in the last 2 weeks that they definitely feel like they should have won. In their game above 500, if you give them a couple of those games, they're 3, 4, 5 games above 500. It's pretty easy to see that when you look at who they are. And who they are is a team that's very much talented, flawed in some areas as far as their roster construction. A lot of that has to do with their injuries. They haven't had their top 8 rotation for a single game this year. So Dame's missed 12 games. Simons has missed 2. Nurk's missed 4. Jeremy's missed, I want to say 3. Josh has missed 2. And Nasir Little has been out now for 2+ weeks, 3 weeks. Justice Winslow rolled the living hell out of his ankle. It was so bad it looked like his foot turned into a J. He touched the outside of his foot to the ground. It was bad. It looks like the dreaded high ankle sprain. And Gary Payton II has played 1 game. So if you're counting at home, Gary Payton II, Nasir Little, Justice Winslow, that's your 6, 7, and 8 man on this team. Not once have they played together. Gary Payton has played 1 game. He rolled his ankle on his return just the other night. I would imagine he's questionable against Indiana. He'll probably get the opportunity, and God, I hope he does, because they're going to need him for Hallie. But they need to get healthy more than anything else, because you can see the bright spots and the parts that don't make a lot of sense, or the parts that need addressing, particular defense. You've got your 3 best defenders, your perimeter defenders, on the bench in suits. GP is the best. If you listen to the guys from the Bay, Sam Esfandiari, Andy Liu, who do Light Years show, they call Gary the best point of attack defender in the NBA. I'm willing to say he's in that category. Ben Simmons, when he wants to be, I think, is the guy, just because he's 6'10", 6'11", and that's just hard to overcome. But we're splitting hairs. Gary's a fantastic point of attack defender. They just haven't had it. They have Jeremy Grant taking on that assignment all night, and then it kind of wears him out. And nothing has been where it's supposed to be. That has been their biggest problem, is that you've got guys picking up slack. You've got a second-year player in Keon Johnson. You got a second-year player in Trenton Watford. You got a rookie in Jabari Walker. You got a rookie in Shaden Sharp. Those guys have been your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th men for the majority of the season. And it's great to get those guys experience, but as you guys know, when you've got a young team, some nights they have it, some nights they don't.
Yeah, look, the Pacers dealt recently with both problems you said, right? The young guys can be inconsistent, right? The Pacers beat Miami, they beat Boston, and then they go to New Orleans playing no Zion, no Ingram, and they lose by 20, right? And lost to the Sixers without Embiid. James Harden's still very good, but that's what young teams do. It's hard to consistently be yourself every game, every day. These one-game road matches are tricky. And the other thing that the Pacers dealt with is bad health. Last year, horrible health, or really bad health. And look, obviously it's bad for wins and losses. Not having player, it's harder to play. Someone else has to step up. Your rotation's different all the time. It's harder to grow chemistry. It's also harder to assess where your team is at in terms of taking the next steps in team building, the next steps in your growth that year, whatever you want to call the next step for a team. But it was really hard for the Pacers to figure out their next move a lot. I don't think the Blazers are in that position, but if it's a lingering thing, you have a lot of your own players.
They are a bit
to that point.
So I was talking to Joe Cronin, the GM of the Blazers, before the season, and I talked to him since about a week ago. I was talking to him again, kind of getting a sense for where they're at. And preseason, the thing that I asked him is, what do you want to see from this team? And he says, I want to see what our identity is. I want to see how these guys play with Damian Lillard. The only player on this team who had sufficient time with Damian Lillard on the roster was Yusuf Nurkic. 3 of their starters are gone from last year. It's Dame and Nurk are the only starters. Anthony Simons got a decent amount of run, particularly last year after Dame was shut down. But Ant didn't play with Dame. He's practiced with him, but he hasn't played. He hasn't gotten a real game time with him. Jeremy Grant's a new addition to the team. Josh Hart, new addition to the team. Never played a minute with him. You start looking at these guys, and so the big thing was who can play with Dame and how well can they play with Dame? Can they be optimized? Do we put Gary in there alongside Dame and let him, Ant be the one who sits down and he's the guy who picks up the defense? Can we run Jeremy Grant? It's a small ball 5. Can you do like an all-wing lineup, which they haven't been able to do all year? Is Nurk, can he play a style of basketball with Damian Lillard and Chauncey Billups that makes sense? Like, there's all these things they wanted to tick off. But he said, I want 2 months to make evaluations. But he also said, this roster's not done. And I know that, we need to make big steps. And that's the thing, is that I don't think that they've had a viable chance yet to have an evaluation period. And talking to Cronin last week, he said he wished he had another month. But you're going to have to start making decisions and making phone calls about guys in the next 2 weeks as you start getting closer to that trade deadline and trying to understand what this team needs more. And Nasir Little is still ramping up from a hip recovery. Justice Winslow, he's out of the boot, but he's still got a massive ankle brace on. And you just start looking. Gary Payton's dealing with another rolled ankle following his core surgery. So they've got decisions they've got to make between now and the deadline. And I don't know if they have come to the necessary or logical conclusions that they necessarily wanted to, because they haven't got to see everything.
Yeah, it's tough. It's especially tough when Dame is playing this well, because you feel like you have to try to go for it. I'll ask you about Dame in a second, but the Pacers, obviously we're talking about the Blazers, but the Pacers just fell into the same kind of trap, right? They never could figure out what the Brogdon, LeVert, Turner, Sabonis team was, because they had all 4 of those guys for no time, basically, together. And so some combos looked good, and then some trios looked bad, and other trios looked good. And it's what do you do with this? How do you proceed with this? It's impossible. The Pacers went the total rebuild route. The Blazers should not do that, because Damian Lillard, quietly, all NBA level this season. For you, probably not quietly. I think for a lot of other people, quietly.
It's a very normal Damian Lillard year.
Per game of his career, 27.5 right now. And the stat that stands out to me in watching Dame, this is the case, best 2-point percentage of his career. A little more balance in the paint. So, 1, how does a guy who missed so much time with injury look so good already? 2, where would you rank this in the best Lillard seasons? 3, what is the best thing the Pacers could do to slow him down, because no one else has figured it out yet?
So, for those that don't know, Damian Lillard's surgery, the reason he was shut down was, 1, a little bit of a power struggle, but 2, he was not the same when he came back from the Olympics this past summer, I should say, last year. Dame has been dealing with this injury, and we knew about it in the media for 4 years. It was a baseball-sized lump that appeared in his groin every year. Sometimes worse than others, sometimes lingering longer. And if you think about Damian Lillard, you think about those deep threes, and you think about that first step, that right to left cross, split cross burst. It was non-existent in the first 3 games of the season. It just wasn't there. And you could see that there was some infighting in the team. There was obviously, trouble behind the scenes with Neil O'Shea before he got fired. Things were just not good. And Dame took the opportunity, hit people in his camp, the people around him, made him understand that he needed to have this surgery because he was not able to do what he needed to do at his level anymore. It was just too bad. Drew Holiday tried to get him to do the surgery in the summertime because Drew had the same surgery and was able to go again. And he said it was life-changing for him. Dame has this surgery, and it wasn't that he couldn't come back. It was that he didn't because they were sucking on purpose. They wanted to tank the rest of the season and get Shaden Sharp, right? So Dame in the offseason, he gets the extension, and he goes and he brings all of his people together. He trains with Phil Beckner, who trains Anthony Simons and Mikal Bridges, a couple other guys. And he gets his strength and conditioning coach here, who's local, kind of a boxing and strength and conditioning coach. He gets a speed coach. He gets a dietitian. He gets everybody all in on the same plan. And he gets his body in the best shape he's ever been in. In the bubble, he was bigger than he'd ever been. If you go back and look at bubble Dame, he looks like a running back. All he did was just chew lead in the lead up to the bubble. He was massive. Now he got his body right. He's about 220, 218. Good solid NFL running back, right? But he got to where he's got his strength, but he's got his recovery. He's got his explosiveness. He's got his agility. He's working on his mobility stuff more regularly. The things that you see guys like Chris Paul and LeBron James do to drag their careers out, that's what Dame has done. And so you're seeing this burst back. And that's where you get to the 2-point percentage. Dame, when he's struggling with the core, he can't get by guys and he can't elevate. So last year and the year before that, his 2-point percentage struggled because he just couldn't do the things athletically that he needed to do in order to finish around the rim. And now his burst is back. Like, he looks like he did 6-7 years ago, which is insane to think about for a guy who's 32. And that time off and that concentration has paid off immensely because he's still Damian Lillard. You can pull from 35 like it's nothing. Like, that's there. What's back again is his ability to beat basically anybody off the bounce. As far as how you contain him, you throw bodies at him. If you are going to try to ISO Damian Lillard with one defender, Godspeed. Godspeed to you because you're going to get cooked. That's not me covering this team. That's me watching this guy for 10 plus years. If you single coverage him, you better have the best defender in the NBA, and they better be fast because you've got to cover him at 35 feet because he will pull. So what you do is you try to get the ball out of his hand by sending bodies at him. He's still 6'2". If you send length at him with bodies, make it harder for him to pass over, you trap him further out, he's gotten significantly better than he ever was. Like, if you want to see him at his worst at that, go back to the 2018 playoffs when they got swept by the Pelicans. That's when Dame figured this out. Like, I've got to understand how to do this. The big change in that now is he's got Anthony Simons, who is more in a Dame mold in the sense of he's a more natural playmaker than his old running mate in CJ. So now when you do that, you do have to worry about Anthony Simons playing 4-on-3 downhill. But you'd rather have that than the top 75 player, getting downhill on one guy. So it remains the same. Throw bodies at him, throw length at him, pick him up further out, get the ball out of his hands. Because if he's got the ball in his hands, he can still split that double. And now you're playing 5-on-3. you're in a really bad position.
Hey guys, one short little break here so I can talk to you about BetOnline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. It's all at BetOnline.net. World Cup's now over, but all the rest of that stuff's still there. And if you love sports podcasts, guess what? You can find those on BetOnline as well. They've got all the NFL lines up for this week. I don't know. I don't think the league has even announced when the games will officially be played. But, for example, the Colts division will be decided in Jags-Titans. Jaguars at home favored by 6.5 in the Saturday game. The other Saturday game, the Chiefs favored by 9.5 over the Raiders. All those lines and more over at BetOnline.net. Go check them out today. Head over to that website or Use your mobile device to learn more because BetOnline is where the game starts. The Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nembhard combo will, to their to their credit, both of them have defended pretty well this year, but
they have.
That's a new level. that's a little bit above what you can be asked to do well.
Dame will test you.
I would guess Nesmith gets that assignment, and they put Nembhard on Simons, and then Haliburton on some forward who can't move or.
I put him on Hart to save him.
That's what I guess they'll do.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Because, look, Dame can warp you around in many ways, and Yusuf Nurkic has the bruising style that Miles Turner kind of struggles with. Like, it could be a tricky matchup for the Pacers. Give me the one-man elevator pitch on the type of player that has killed the Blazers this year, and do the Pacers have any of them?
Big-bodied wings. Luka. Yeah. No. Speedy guards have been problematic in a sense. Because they'll throw Josh Hart on him, they'll throw Jeremy Grant on him. The hope obviously was Gary Payton, or they throw Justice Winslow, or they throw Nasir Little. They're shorthanded on that right now. I expect Hallie to have a game. I'm a huge Haliburton guy. I still think Hallie's going to be a problem. His playmaking, his vision, his ability to see plays early. Portland, their biggest issue recently has been attention to detail. They started off the season running a lot of zone, and it bothered some teams. They've been trying to go back to it, but their communication has been really poor. And if you get them into rotation on their zone, or if you get them into a switch just with some baseline actions, overloading a strong side and kind of making them question where they need to be in those zones, or question how they need to handle a certain coverage if they go to a matchup zone or something along those lines, those are the things that will bother Portland. Like I fully expect Hallie to have a night. If you get them to make more than one rotation defensively, and you're consistent in your passing, you will get an open shot. They're just not disciplined enough. That has been their problem this year. If they're consistent and they lock in, they can be an okay defense. Like, they can be a 15, 16, 17th overall rated defense. Like, that's this peak, just where they're at, especially being shorthanded. But I can see Buddy having a night. I can see Miles having a night. I can see Hallie having a night. And that's the thing, is that even though the big-bodied wings, the Lukas, the Giannis, the superstars of the world, the wings, they just don't have an answer for that. They really don't have an answer for when they don't give a damn. And that has been a problem, is that it's not an effort give a damn, it is a mental give a damn of staying attached and knowing scouting reports, like, not going under a screen on like a Buddy Hield on a flare screen. Like, don't do stupid stuff like that. And that has kind of been their Achilles heel over the last couple of weeks when they drop games.
Yeah, look, the Pacers don't have any of those big-bodied wings, and they can relate to that problem, right? Like, even non-superstar division, your Mikal Bridges, your OG Anunoby, your Gordon Hayward, your trying to think of other Harrison Barnes types, right? Like, the Pacers have had nothing for them the last couple of years, and Jeremy Grant's better than anything the Pacers have even had, but those are hard guys to defend if you don't have the right size, strength, speed, match combo to do it. And then the Pacers have none of those guys. So the Blazers don't have to worry about that. The guard play will be where this one is decided. My last question for you, Danny, something I've asked a lot of people I've had on who cover other teams. Like, the Pacers are 21-18, so a lot of these questions started the season with are different now. But before the season started, the front office was talking about their new thinking, longer term, not as year to year. Rick Carlisle, the first thing he said on Media Day was, this is a new era of Pacers basketball, right? It's not a secret what happens when you make big trades and then you have a dozen 25-year-old players or younger on your team. Like, you're not rebuilding, especially when you're good like they are now, but you're definitely not expecting to be awesome in year one. Either way, the Pacers haven't gone through something like this in a while. That said, they're good, so maybe they won't have to. But in general, I've been fielding questions from others, been having others field questions for me about team building and what the franchises have done well or poorly to get to where they are. And the Blazers obviously drafted Dame, which is a big factor in team building success when you draft a superstar. But
really helpful.
I feel like, especially uniquely, the Blazers have done well or poorly in the team building process as they have tried to construct the best version of their team.
So the Blazers are in a.
Is also key here.
What's that?
Is it replicatable by other franchises? That's also important.
Yeah, so the Blazers are in kind of a weird spot. And quick shout out to somebody obviously working with the Pacers, and Chad Buchanan, because he was the one who was responsible for drafting Damian Lillard. So shout out to Chad. Neil O'Shea pulled the actual card, but Chad did all the work. So there you go.
I think he did the trade for the pick too. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, shout out to Billy King. Appreciate you, Billy. Everybody always talks about the Celtics ones. They forget that he also gave away Damian Lillard for Gerald Wallace. Oops. But you look at what the Blazers have done. Obviously, drafting Damian Lillard, having a franchise cornerstone, that matters. It's huge. Anthony Simons was 25th overall, and the Blazers would have wished they would have got him or would have taken him later, but there was a promise in from the Lakers, so they had to take him there. Jeremy Grant was literally acquired for a 2025 Milwaukee Bucks first-round pick and some second-round swaps, which not exactly that much. They traded Mason Plumlee to Denver for Yusuf Nurkic in a first. They were really trading for the first, and the price of that first was taking Yusuf Nurkic. And then they get Josh Hart and the CJ McCollum deal. So the only part of this that was new really in the starting lineup, Josh Hart and Jeremy Grant, the two most wingy players that they have had in this franchise in 10 years. That's Joe Cronin. That's the new GM. He was the one who pulled the deal on CJ McCollum that Neil O'Shea refused to do. There were times when Neil O'Shea could have traded CJ McCollum for James Harden or Paul George or Jimmy Butler. Like, those opportunities were there, and they just refused to do it. Now, if you're talking about the replicable part, it's Joe Cronin was willing to take risks. He convinced Damian Lillard to shut it down. He convinced Anthony Simons and Yusuf Nurkic to shut it down, and then tanked the season. They lost 15 games by 30 or more last year, an NBA record. Like,
the Pacers' last win last year was against the Blazers that they lost.
Yeah. Okay, so let's think about this. The process 76ers are tipping their cap to the Blazers because they went 2-22 down the stretch. They were awful. I mean, it was a level of tanking that you would not believe. Is that replicable? Yeah, if you're willing and able to hit a hard reset and swallow half a season of sucking so bad that you put yourself from middle of the pack, because they were like slightly under 500 when they started. I think they're 18-20 when they pulled the plug, and they finished the season as the 6th worst record in the NBA. Like, they sucked. It was hard basketball to watch. It was really hard, but it was only for 4 months. It wasn't 4 years. They get Damian Lillard back. They re-sign Anthony Simons. They re-sign Yusuf Nurkic. They trade for Jeremy Grant. They trade for Josh Hart. They trade for Justice Winslow. They re-sign or they extend Nasir Little. They use their free agent money on Gary Payton, and you're like, wow, this team makes a lot more sense. Like, and nothing about it was that out there. It was just are you willing to, like, take a risk? The next version of this team won't be as good as the Dame CJ core, which, as good as it was, had very finite limits that we had seen for 7 years.
Yeah, timing, knowing when to pull the plug. Ironically, the Pacers did similar last year.
Mm-hmm.
They were a little farther under 500, but they were like, okay, this is wrong. And
it was very similar. What both teams did.
Yeah, but the Pacers did not have we have Damian Lillard backdrop.
Yes.
This past offseason. So at some point they'll have to do get Gary Payton, get Nasir Little locked up or whoever. I think their Nasir Little might be Aaron Nesmith, for example. Get that guy on your team. That's the step that they'll have to do next. It's not that their team makes a lot of sense. Like, their rotation right now is balanced. They're over 500. Like, they're good. But it's also like, they're less than a year removed from a lot of trades, right? It's not like the vision was like, we really want these 10 guys to be our rotation, right? They haven't quite had the time to fill that all out with signings. So, yeah, looking at how Portland did it, the timing element, and look, something the Pacers did already that the Blazers did, it's so important to know when to pull the plug. And some teams don't. Mm-hmm. And it can be hard. Like, there's a lot of sentimental value and resources already invested you have to think about. But, yeah, both teams did it at the right time. And now the next step for the Pacers is knowing when the right time is to do what Portland just did and make it all make sense. Bring in ancillary is a word I like to talk about those kind of pieces, even though it sounds like they're not important when you say ancillary, but they are important. But those kind of pieces to really bring it all together. And I think that there's some timeline stuff they'll have to sort out, but I think the Blazers blueprint will be potentially useful. The Blazers recent blueprint will be potentially useful for them pretty soon.
I'll give you two timeline related things here. I asked Joe Cronin about the idea of having two different timelines because Damian Lillard's 32, Nurk's 28, Jeremy's 28, Ant's 23, Shaden's 19. You could kind of group the young guys and Ant into one and then Dame, Jeremy, and Nurk into another. And I was like, so how do you, to the people who don't understand what you're trying to do or what you're willing to do, like the whole idea of building on two timelines? And he said, we understand that it's reckless, but we're willing to take that risk because it's going to be difficult to work in both timelines. But we feel like we owe it to Damian Lillard to do both. And I thought that was a really interesting take. Like, they're not dumb. They know that this might not work and that they might have to sacrifice some of one timeline for another. Like, it may one rail may ultimately have to take over. And I just found it interesting that they were like openly admitting that. And the other part of what this was, and I think something for Indiana to consider, when at media day this past year, or this past summer, Joe also said, we need 18 months. We need 18 months to get through everything before we have what we want. And that was in part because Neil O'Shea exhausted the Blazers' resources. You know, they traded picks for Norman Powell or for Robert Covington. And they traded a pick along with Gary Trent for Norman Powell. They traded 2 picks, in fact, for Robert Covington. And so all their draft capital is locked up. It's gone. All their young guys, the only guy they had left was Anthony Simons because everybody else had left. They let, Connaughton, go for free. So he said, listen, we need 18 months. And that's not just like an arbitrary timeline. I just need to get 2 cycles, 2 off seasons where I have all of my exceptions. And then when you had in that, I'm sorry, it wasn't media day that he said this. It was trade deadline last year. I need 18 months. So the hope is for the Blazers that by the beginning of next season, 2 summers, 2 trade deadlines, where they have 2 opportunities to use their trade exceptions, and they have an opportunity to have like some time with what they have and a trade deadline. And if you look at the Pacers, I think you could very much say the same thing. Give them 18 months so they have the opportunity to work through their exceptions. Is Duarte just another guy? Or is he a part of, like, do you want to keep him around? Like again, the ancillary parts. Like, you know what you have in Hallie. Hallie is your dude. Mathurin very much looks like the same. Beyond that, who are you truly committed to? Because in the NBA, you really can only be committed to 1, sometimes 2 dudes, like truly committed. Everybody else, it's a varying level of that. And with the Pacers, you need to figure out, like, is Nembhard a dude or is he just another guy? And I think that's what this season is, successful or unsuccessful. You don't measure it in wins and losses if I'm the Pacers. You measure it in what you know you have and what you know you don't have. And then what you do with it in the offseason and the next trade deadline.
Yeah, it's tricky, and that's what people way smarter than either of us are paid to do, is figure it all out. Pacers Blazers tonight should be a blast. I'm glad Haliburton versus Dame gets to happen at least once in NBA season. Danny, where can people find you and your work covering the Blazers?
Yeah. If you find yourself in Portland, or if you want to listen to Portland terrestrial radio, you can go to 1080thefan.com or listen to 1080 The Fan in Portland, Oregon, or on YouTube, youtube.com/Danny Marang. As part of Jack Ramsey's, we do live shows, watch parties, post game. Sometimes depends on how late I get done with post game. We do at least 2 live shows on YouTube a week, and then I try to figure out as many post games as I can get in there.
Love it. Portland's fun. Portland has sometimes been referred to as Pacers East or Pacers West, for many of the reasons connecting the franchises. There are a lot of great people covering the Blazers, Danny being one of them. Check out him and his work. We'll be back Monday talking about whatever happened in Pacers Blazers as well as Pacers Hornets on Sunday. Plus, there's this big contract guarantee deadline coming right up. It's going to happen with James Johnson and Osei Brissett. Talked about it earlier this week. You'll get the results of that this weekend and come Monday. Thank you all a ton for listening. We will see you soon.